The next step or important entity that you would be dealing with from a payroll batch loader is the creation of elements. So we will do a quick walkthrough of how to create elements via the user interface. The navigation for which is you either go via payroll calculation, earnings and deductions, manage elements, or use the other link, payroll administration and manage payroll process configuration, manage elements. So was it covered as a part of your functional training? The creation of elements, sum it up. So essentially you create the element under legislative data group, and by specifying what is the earnings and what is the primary classification and what is the secondary classification. So if you are from an e-business suite background, you will note that this roughly corresponds to the template that US legislation had, where you are supposed to select some high-level detail, and behind the scene it creates additional data for you. It creates a bunch of elements, formulas, status processing rules, and so on. So this is the element creation UI. The reason why we are going through the UI part is just so that you are aware of what are the various fields you would typically enter while creating the data via UI. So you have the name, reporting name, you enter the input currency, the fact that whether every person is automatically received, whether it's a behind the scenes this gets converted into a standard link or not, or the standard element or not. When the element, what is the first date on which the element can be assigned to the person? It is the first standard earnings date. What is the later on termination? What happens? Should it get closed on the date of termination, or should it be there till the final close, and so on? In Fusion, element can be attached at multiple employment levels. It can be either at the assignment level, relationship, or term level. Is the element a recurring or non-recurring is the next question. And then whether can a person have multiple entries of the same element within the same payroll period. So these are a bunch of questions you typically answer while creating an element. Depending on the legislations, you might have further queries. Specifically, if it is a US, you will have you might have additional queries depending on the classification that is involved. Once you create the element, then it creates a bunch of associated input values for fast formulas and so on, depending on the template. So in this case, template, it hasn't really created additional entities. We will go ahead and create a demo input value for our use case, in which case we enter a demo input value, what is the unit of measure, whether there is a default value, min, max for that, so on, whether the input value needs to be displayed, whether it allows user entry or not. Next, you create something called as element eligibility or element link, which says who should be get this element entry, or who is eligible to get this element via element entry. Most of these concepts would be very similar if you are from an e-business suite background. So we'll quickly via the UI and then jump to the spreadsheet part to say how it looks like. So Mahendran, normally, are you from e-business suite background or from a PeopleSoft background? Just to set the pace to say whether if some of these are.
Yeah, we are from e-business background, but there
Sorry,
are participants on HCM as well as finance. So maybe for finance guys, it will be a little new, and for HCM folks, it is all one and the same.
Okay. Correct. Okay. Okay. So you create a legislative data group. First, you select you select a primary classification earnings, or the secondary classification is not mandatory, so I say continue. I say this element needs to be available from 2010. The input currency is Indian rupee. We'll just go with whatever values we have seen in the screenshot. This dictates as to when the entry should get terminated, or till what point the element entry should be available. The element, at what level should this element be attached? Should it be, so in borrowing from PeopleSoft, in eBusiness Suite, you have 3 levels of you have something called as payroll relationship. The employment at the payroll side can be at payroll. I mean, you can have, it's a 3-tiered model. So starting from payroll relationship, then you have payroll term below it, and then payroll assignment. So that is the hierarchy. Relationship at the top, payroll term next, and then payroll assignment. So I say this element should be available at a assignment level. So where you would choose, options can be something like this. Say you are in your company, you are rolling out bonus, and what level should you be targeting the bonus at? Should say an employee is doing 2 jobs in the same company, should each of these jobs receive a bonus, or is the bonus more like at a person level, 1 per person or 1 per job that he is doing? So that kind of question will help answer this question, to say at what employment level should this element be attached. So does this element reoccur every payroll period? So something like a salary will be a recurring entry. You would have 1 entry probably for that particular assignment, whereas something like a bonus would be a non-recurring. The company will give bonus, say, once in 6 months or once a year if the person is lucky. So the next question is, can a person have more than 1 entry of the element in the same period? So from eBusiness Suite, this maps to actually whether multiple entries is allowed or not. I say next. Say next. There's no question here. This just summarizes what are the options that we selected, what is the default value for those options, and what is the value that we chose. I say submit. It should show up the element summary page. So this hasn't created any input value. So here I say some demo value. So should this input value be displayed on the UI? Should users be allowed to enter values for it, or is it enterable via some other mechanism? So I say submit. And we'll create a element eligibility. Create element eligibility using the actions button, and then there is actually an issue with this UI, but because of the current patching level on this instance, I may not be able to create a link. Might allow me to create. So we are done with, we have created eligibility without providing any restrictions, which means that any employee in the receive this input eligibility, not the element link. Let me delete and try to recreate. Since the page is stuck. Okay, it allowed me to create anyway. So we will now go to the payroll batch loader to say how the element creation looks like from the payroll batch loader perspective. So let me create a new one, which is called demo 12 May element. I will again use INLDG. Since we have seen this step, I will rush through. Basically, there is not much. You just create the batch name, you specify the legislative data group. I think the connection has, so I select the batch name to set the context. Just the task, which is element. So once I select the task, you will notice that it populates various questions depending on the depending on the template that I had chosen here. So this is global earnings basic. So let's try to create a element with this name. So demo 12 May global earn basic. Let us use the same reporting name. I'll leave the non-mandatory columns blank. I want the element to be effective 01 Jan 2010. So here it says what is the calculation rule. If you don't know the answer to that question, go to, actually this is a different template probably I should have picked up. Whether it, the calculation rule says whether it is a flat or whether it's a percentage based earnings and so on. This is not available in our element. Or for the element that we just created, or if you choose some other legislation, you probably have a better idea of what these columns mean. So let me select US legislative data group. US. Again, this demo is not a functional demo to say how elements work, but rather for you to get an idea of where you can get these values from for in each of the cases that is supported by Payroll Batch Loader. So if it is UI, as we said, we have seen the case of formula or seen the case of elements that the headers here should map to the headers that are available in the or columns available in the UI. So something like an input currency, you will be able to search for the UI itself. It should be some other element. So input currency will be Indian rupee. Typically output currency gets defaulted. Similarly, if you want to fetch the value for the element from a particular user-defined table, you can indicate from which row of the user-defined table should the value come from, which column of the user-defined table should the value be sourced from, and so on. If it is tied to a user-defined table, we will skip all these non-mandatory ones. The subject to proration indicates whether you want to part pay the element. For example, if an employee moves from one payroll to another, what happens? Or if the employee joins midweek, should the element be processed to provide that calculation? Say he worked 2 days out of the 5 days, so instead of providing the total value of $200, should I prorate it with certain based on the number of days he has actually worked? In case a column does not come up in full, do not try to adjust the column. Instead, try to adjust the row width.